Was there any point in those early years where you considered quitting the movie business and transitioning to like a more conventional or stable line of work, or was it foot on the gas, blinders on, this is what you want to do all the way?
Yeah, but that's a good question too, because there's so many times I mean, every day you want to quit the business, you get so frustrated or fed up with it or something, or it's just too much. Um, I didn't know what else to do. I mean, I didn't write for a long time. The first couple of movies I made, I produced and raised money. I didn't write. And those movies were costly in terms of time and energy and personal relationships. Um, and I think that is when I said, what else can I do? It's too, I don't want to be an accountant. I bagged my law degree and I took the law boards and said, I'm not going to law school. I didn't know what else to do. The movies was all I ever wanted to do. And so I started writing, um, which seemed to be what I was supposed to do. I guess it's either get out of the business or do something else. So I started writing. And it turned out to be that's what I was supposed to do. So, but yes, I think every day you wonder, why am I in this crazy business? Even when things are going well, you went, well, I don't know. Will they go well much longer? I don't know. And especially when you have a dip or you have a sagging moment in your career when you're going, okay, I'm done. I probably reinvented myself 10 times where I've been on the bottom and then came back up to the top and went around to the bottom, came back up to the top. Yeah. Um, well, for instance, nobody wanted to do Hook. Nobody wanted to do Dracula. My agents fired me. You're too old. You don't have anything done while I was writing Hook and Dracula. So um, they wanted me to quit. And and when I finished Hook and Dracula, that was a real big resurrection because I was on the bottom. We were done. Hadn't had anything made. I was in my 40s, and it looked pretty grim. So you don't give up.
Well,
You just
speaking
don't give up.
of Hook, one thing that really fascinated me in researching for this interview is the timing and the differences between your debut feature film script, Gimme an F, and I guess, your sophomore film, Hook. I mean, that's an incredible difference in scope and scale and subject matter. How did that first screenwriting job come about, and what do you think it did to prepare you for what was to come next with Hook?
Well, Give Me an F was autobiographical. I was a male cheerleader at SMU and in my high school in Fort Worth, which I thought was fascinating because male cheerleaders were supposed to be either gay or perverse or something. We were not. We were not. We were. It was not. It wasn't a sport. And in Texas, you played sports. So I did track and I was a cheerleader. I wrote the script to Give Me an F. And it was raunchy. I mean, it was like Porky's or, it was before Animal House. It was raunchy. And it was depicting the women and the girls that I had worked with in a way that I got to know them very differently than most people do. And I mean, how they talk, what their bad habits are, um, how they view men. I mean, it was a raunchy romp. And when it got made, it didn't get made the way I wanted it to. It was toned down and kind of cheesy, and there's some really good stuff in it, but it didn't have that savage R-rated women
Hmm.
talking like we've never heard them talk before. That was later for Slapshot when somebody else, later for Animal, all that stuff. So when that failed, must have been 84. When that failed, um, I still had was trying to have a writing career. Um, in those days, I got a lot of development deals where, I mean, I wrote for Redford Newman. I wrote for a number of kind of star kind of vehicles. None of them got made. But every time I would write one, I would get bigger. I would take on a bigger scope. And finally, I wrote a big sci-fi script that Frank Marshall wanted to do with Steven Spielberg, and that was in 1982. And that kind of changed things. Suddenly, I was writing for a bigger canvas. I wasn't writing I refused to do comedy ever again after my experience on Give Me an F because of how badly they turned it around. So I went back to fantasy, which is what I grew up with, sci-fi, pirates. I was a Captain Hook fan when I was in first grade. Uh, the idea for Hook came from my son Jake, who was in 6 years old. He's now our writing partner. And it's that dinner table game we would play called What If, and we would stand fairy tales on their heads. What if Cinderella's glass slipper didn't fit? What if Prince Charming had bad breath? What if Frodo's ring didn't fit? And finally Jake said, "What if Peter Pan grew up?" And I went, "No, no, no, no. That's taboo. Everybody knows that Peter Pan didn't grow up." And he went, "Yeah, Dad, but what if he did?" And the light bulbs went off, the bells, the heavens opened up, and as a family, we created that story that night at the dinner table. And I was terrified. This was Walt Disney. This is all the stuff this is, this is blasphemy. And I was afraid to even tell my agent about it. And everybody in town turned it down. Everybody. Nobody wanted to do a grown-up Peter Pan. Uh, couldn't fathom it. It would be a disaster. Um, and then we got an opportunity to do it at Sony as a kind of a gimme, throw me a bone deal
Mm-hmm.
with Nick Castle, who is a wonderful director. I loved his film Boy Could Fly, and it would be great for the film. So we spent a year writing that script with nobody paying any attention to us. It was never going to get made. Nothing was ever going to happen with it. At the same time, I was writing Dracula. Same thing. Nobody wanted to do it. We did it at USA Network or Wilshire Court for like a TV movie. Nobody cared. And so those two scripts came in and things happened. Mike Medavoy read Hook and went, "Wait a minute, where has this been? This is a big movie." Um, Coppola read Dracula, thanks to Winona Ryder. And he said, who's directing? So almost, I was the overnight success. It took 20 years. And suddenly the two biggest directors in the business wanted to do those two scripts. And I had been fired by my agent, and nobody wanted to represent me. So I guess there was that place in between Gimme an F and Hook where you got a lot of practice writing and getting paid to do it. The kids would come home from school and say, "We tell everybody you're a screenwriter. They want to know, what movies have you made?" And I didn't have any. I had a wall of unproduced scripts. So I think that time between Gimme an F and writing Hook was a great training ground for me. And also I had kids. And that changed everything when I had kids. I never would have written Hook if I hadn't had kids.
Was there a moment in the film that when you finally saw it on screen, you were surprised at how incredible it turned out?
Well, this is interesting because that's we could do a whole thing on Hook. Um, the shoot was very difficult. Malia Scotch-Marmo was on writing with me. Stephen had other writers come in on Hook. I was seeing things that were not getting shot or that were getting changed. That I would slip him faxes on Sunday night. This is what the next morning it would show up in the script as if written by somebody else, which is fine. And I was concerned because they didn't want to kill Rufio. Stephen did not want to kill Rufio. He didn't want Toodles in the movie. There were things that were being decided that I thought were going to make the movie more juvenile with less. I mean, if Rufio didn't die and all you got in Neverland is marbles and tomatoes, there's no jeopardy for Peter. There's no jeopardy for the father and the kids. So I remember sitting in my little office there at Sony when I was working on Dracula, and the stunt double who did work for Robin came and stuck his head in and said, "We're gonna kill Rufio." And I knew that somehow the message had finally gotten through that if there's no real jeopardy in Neverland, if we don't lose somebody we care about, if somebody doesn't die, and it turns out that Dante Basco, who played Rufio, turned that into an iconic character. and that his death scene impacted so many young people when they saw it. They still, the first thing they talk to me about when they see me is Rufio, and what an impact that death scene had. So I think I'm answering your question. Um, so when I finally saw the finished film all by myself in a screening room, that's what you do with the Writers Guild, I was knocked out. I mean, I knew what the great Michael Kahn went through to construct that film in the editing room, because it's not the way Steven shot it. It wasn't, the continuity of the film is not the continuity of the way Steven shot the film. I think he needed,
Mhm.
I think he needed 6 more months on the script to really make it his. And I was blown away, and my family wouldn't speak to me after they saw it. For several hours, they would not speak to me because they knew what wasn't in the film.
Mm.
So the fact that the audience loves it, and now my family is the same way. Everybody's the audience embraced that film and made it the success that has long legs. I mean, the afterlife on that film is amazing. Mr. Spielberg doesn't like the film and has often criticized it, and he has no idea what in spite of his success, um, and it works constantly over and over and over again. People will come up to me and go, "We watched. I just showed this to my son or my child, or I just showed this to my grandkids, or I remember when the first time I saw. They've all people. So many people were impacted by that film, even though it wasn't deemed a success at the time.
I thought I had
And
read somewhere that Spielberg wanted it to be a musical, maybe.
well,
Was that a thing?
that musical soundtrack is now out. It just came out on a special edition of John Williams' um, soundtrack, including all the songs. I think there were 4 songs or 5 songs recorded. Yeah, Stephen had always imagined doing Peter Pan as a musical. That was what he wanted to do, not Hook. So Leslie Bricusse and Anthony Newley and John Williams, they did 5 songs. They filmed 2 of them. One was a big pirate number when they come into with the hook. That was a big musical number.
Hmm.
And there were 2 other songs. When Mom's Caroline Goodall sang as Moira. Um, the other song was a beautiful song, When You're All Alone, and they just didn't work. They were not consistent with the tone of the film. So some of that footage is somewhere. I remember seeing a cut of with a couple of the musical numbers cut into it, and I think Stephen realized that it should have been conceived as a musical from the beginning. You couldn't just take the story that I had written and turn it into a musical unless it was conceived that way from the very beginning. That would have meant that Maggie Smith would have had to have a song, in London. I mean, it couldn't just be a musical in Neverland. So yeah, that was one of his original conceits, that he wanted to do a musical.